Hello, everyone. It's the Prophet Michael David, aka Aries, again. This is the first time I'm ever going to do two videos in one day, but I kind of feel obligated because when I was posting my last one, I saw that I actually got some comments and everything on the previous video, the one that's labeled The Mashiach Cannot Be Jewish. So watch that one if you're interested. Okay, so I read the comments, and a couple of them were obviously bots. One was obviously a spam bot and everything, but the other ones may have been legit, especially one that asked about something like, "What do you mean about that Jesus thing that I said in, the previous video? The Mashiach cannot be Jewish." And so I would like to elaborate on that. What I meant was, as Mashiach and somebody that talks directly to God, that I know exactly what happened to Jesus, over 2,000 years ago, why he was crucified, why he went to Jerusalem in the first place, like all the details of that stuff that people have always been asking about. But first, I gotta kind of detail all the stuff that I know about Jesus. Okay, firstly, as you can see by the thumbnail of this very video, Jesus' true name, or Jesus' given name, wasn't Jesus, it was Yeshua. In Hebrew, Yeshua means salvation, and the most common translation, the best translation for today's modern English, would be Joshua. Okay, so if Jesus' real name is Yeshua or Joshua, then why does everybody call him Jesus? And well, that's for the same reason that everyone calls him Christ and not Messiah. When Jesus lived and died, his initial story was written down in ancient Hebrew, but that ancient Hebrew was ultimately translated into Greek because the Greeks translated everything. The problems with translations, especially across different languages, is they don't always have the same letters, but more importantly, they don't always have the same sounds. It still happens to this day. The Asian language has a very difficult differentiating between the R and the L. And for the same reason, even in American English, in certain accents like the Boston accent, they do not pronounce the R sound at the end of their words. I mean, have you ever heard Bernie Sanders pronounce an R sound at the end of a word? For that very same reason, the Greek language at that time, or maybe still today, had a very hard time with the Y sound, the Y sound that is very prevalent in the Hebrew language. Yeshua, Yosef, stuff like that. So words or names with that Y sound, the Y sound, all got translated into words with either J sounds or G sounds, so G or J. For a very similar reason, the term Messiah or Mashiach got translated into the word Christos in Greek because the Y was just not very compliant with the Greek. That is how Yeshua the Messiah or Yeshua the Mashiach got translated into Jesus Christos, which later became Jesus Christ. Okay, so really short sidebar. So that means Christ, Christos, Messiah, and Mashiach all mean the same thing, which they do. And in the end, it's not anything really divine. It just means anointed one or anointed person of God. We'll talk more about it later. Okay, as I've said before in a previous video, in a future video, I will elaborate on my claim as the end times Christian prophet. But for now, let me just say a couple more things about Jesus. When I tell you that I'm eventually going to explain, the truth about what happened to Jesus over 2,000 years ago, I'm not going to tell you a story or anything. I'm just going to read some things about Jesus and his mom on Wikipedia that you can look at yourselves, and then read a passage out of my mom's Bible, and then a couple more things. But I'm just going to put you in a situation and then ask you about human nature and say, these people were just like us. They may have lived 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago or whatever, but they were still humans, and they still thought about things like us, and they still wanted things like us, and they still acted like us in a lot of ways. They showed human nature. What would a person do in this situation these days, in the same human nature situation? In a really long-winded way of saying things, I'm not going to tell you a story and tell you what happened. I'm going to read from some stuff, and then I'm going to ask you, so what really happened? And like 99% of the people, whether they want to or not, will come to the same conclusion. Okay, now into some slightly difficult stuff, but um, I guess I would put it as, what is the most difficult part about Jesus? Or what is the most difficult part about the story of Jesus to me right now? Well, simply put, and I might do this entire video on this later, and maybe other people will too, but the most conflicting part about Jesus, or the way he's been portrayed to humanity since he died, or at least for the last, I don't know, 1700 years, is that there are no stories about Jesus in his teens or his 20s. There's only stories about Jesus when he was 12 years old and when he was 30 until he was 33 until he was crucified. And I have a huge problem with this because the teens and the 20s are the developmental age for any human being from 12 until 29. It's when we go through puberty. It's when, our relationship with other boys and girls change. It's when our relationship with our mothers and fathers change. Then you go through puberty, then you add in the sex, and then they have to look for a job. And then you're in your mid 20s, and then you think about getting married. Again, this is human nature. These people were just like us. They didn't have our high technology, but they're very much just like us. They had the same hopes and dreams. So it is a huge red flag to me that as famous and influential as Jesus Christ is, there are no stories of him from his teenage or 20 years. Either they don't exist, which means Jesus didn't exist, which he most likely certainly did, or those stories have been taken out of circulation. All right, I'll end on that cliffhanger, but just a couple more things. For any, I guess, Christians that see this and want to start calling me the Antichrist or whatever, no, I'm not. I'm just a pacifist, nice guy that got tapped by God and everything. I mean none of you any harm. I'm just saying things that God wants me to tell you. I'm never going to hurt you physically in any way. If my words hurt you, just grow thicker skin. That being said, just as a cherry on top, for any of you that think Jesus would actually, come down and smite me and punish me for my insolence, probably not. The closest church to me is a church called St. Anne's. And for any of you, that is St. Anne, that's the Virgin Mary's mother, whom I call the Prophet Mary. And I also have a little statue of Mary that I wouldn't say talk to. I call them mantras where I acknowledge my dead parents, I acknowledge God, I acknowledge the angel of the Lord, and I acknowledge Mary. I just say Hail Mary and everything. And so you could say on any given day, I say more Hail Marys than your Catholic aunt does on Sundays. I try to move the computer here and do the whole thing so you can see my Mary statue. So try not to get vertigo. Hopefully she comes in frame. I kid you not, I did that in one take. I'm so proud of myself. So I'm going to end there. And as always, the 2 rules again. Do not touch another person without their consent, aka do not hurt each other. And number 2, it's all about lies. It's all about honesty. Lies are a tick down. See, I screwed it up. I'm not even going to edit this, aka try not to lie.